We're going to go all the way in New Mexico now again for the Battle of Canada Alamosa, which was known to the Union, or just simply Alamosa as it was known to the Confederates. Just a little skirmish on the late evening of September 24th and the morning of September 25th. 1861 is one of several small battles that occurred in Confederate Arizona near the border with the Union-held New Mexico. This one being the largest.
Right.
This battle occurred about 35 miles south of Fort Craig at the village of San Ignacio de la Alamosa, familiarly known as Alamosa. Yes,
right.
Near the confluence of the Alamosa Creek with the Rio Grande. Alamosa was wrongly identified in Union Army reports as Canada Alamosa, the name later given to what is now present-day Monticello, New Mexico.
Okay.
Bethel Copewood, the Confederate commander, correctly identified it as Alamosa in his report of September 29th, 1861.
Lieutenant Colonel John R. Baylor, who had led the 2nd Texas Mounted Rifles.
Oh, hey, do you think that's the guy that Baylor's named after?
Baylor.
The college?
It's very possible. I doubt it, though.
He is the Texas Mounted Rifle commander.
Oh, shit. Lieutenant Colonel John R. Baylor, who had led the 2nd Texas Mounted Rifles into New Mexico territory 1 month earlier, defeated the Union garrison of Fort Fillmore at the First Battle of Mesilla.
We did that one. Go back, check it out.
Proclaimed heir to Confederate Arizona.
Yep.
And appointed himself governor.
He did some stuff. He was like, I'm governor now.
Sent patrols up to Rio Grande to keep watch on Union posts as Fort Craig and Fort Stanton near the 34th parallel. So you go watch those two forts, and you let me know if any action comes this way. 112-man detachment Confederate cavalry under Captain Bethel Coopwood with his spy company and units of the 2nd Texas Mounted Rifles followed a route north toward Fort Craig, west of the Rio Grande and the wagon road along the foot of the mountains. So they're like just off the beaten trail, right? Along the way.
I wouldn't say they're off the beaten trail when they're on a wagon road.
Well, they weren't.
Clearly are.
It's at just west.
They followed a route, just west of the wagon road. Right.
Along the way, they noted various streams and springs the Army might use.
Hey, man, look at that. We could camp here, get some fresh, clean water. Right. 2 days after the engagement in Canada Alamosa 2 days before, not after. 2 days before the engagement at Canada Alamosa on the 23rd of September, 1861, Coopwood's Confederate troops captured 9 men from the New Mexico Volunteers after a brief skirmish due north of Fort Craig. The force was questioned, and the Confederates learned that 350 men garrisoned the fort with no artillery. Why do you have a fort with no artillery? I don't understand this. With this information, they turned to retrace their steps southward. The Union Army, specifically the Regiment of Mounted Riflemen at Fort Craig, had launched a reconnaissance mission to guard against the approach of Confederate forces up the Rio Grande.
Okay.
The unit sent was a recently formed unit of New Mexican militia called Mink's Independent Cavalry Company. Captain John H. Mink's company stopped at the village of San Ignacio de la Alamosa, or La Alamosa, on the south side of Arroyo Alamosa. How many Alamosas are there?
Right.
There, Mink ordered his men to build a camp next to the village.
Okay.
The camp consisted of a corral and breastworks to subdue any possible and sudden Confederate counterattack.
Right. Well, before they can get this finished, September 24th, about 5 p.m., the Union force of around 100 and under Captain Minks received information that mounted rebels had been seen in a southern direction from the camp. A 6-man cavalry troop with a Mexican scout was dispatched, who returned saying the sighted men were Union deserters who evaded capture. Later that night, Union troops at the Canada Alamosa reported another sighting of armed men. Some said the unknown men in the dark fired into the town, but this has never been confirmed. In response, Captain Minks put his troops on high alert.
Yeah, I would assume so. There's just random guys running around.
They should be on high alert anyway.
Right? I mean, you guys are in the middle of a war.
Jeez, morons.
At this time, a few horses escaped the corral. About 10 men were ordered to bring them back, but some 30 ended up in the chase before Minks could prevent it.
Dang.
Most of the 30 men deserted into the desert, crossing the Rio Grande to East Bank and headed for Harage, where another independent company of New Mexican cavalry guarded the approach along the Jornada del Muerto. A terrible Native American yell was heard, which had the Union troops thinking they were under attack by Apache. Then came the sound of cavalry and the shout, "Here's their camp, give them hell." At that moment, the Union force, they knew they were not being attacked by Apaches, but by 12 to 15 Confederate troops commanded by Captain Coopwood from Mesilla.
Oh,
Damn! So they went out with a false. They went out with like some false flag shit at first.
Right. Well, what they heard was it wasn't no Apache, dreadful Indian yell. No, that was the rebel yell.
It might have been, right? I don't know. This is New Mexico. They didn't even know about the rebel yell, did they?
I don't even know if they knew there was a war going on.
They're like, yeah, they never even knew. This is not even part of the Civil War to them. They're just, this is happening in Texas and fucking New Mexico. So,
right. What? You telling me we've been at war for 4 years? I've been at war for 20.
Right. I've been doing this shit for the last 2 decades.
The firing commenced. Rebel cavalry first attacked the Union's army's main line. After the attack was repulsed, the rebels fell back to town. The dozen Confederate cavalrymen had attempted to rout the Union army with the cover of nightfall, but failed to do so.
Only 12? How many guys are they attacking?
Right, they had a lack of firepower. The shooting stopped for a short while. This made the captain and his men think the rebels had retreated, or playing a ruse to lure Mink's men into a more effective range.
Yeah, I think it's the second one. So Captain Minks and a number of his men slowly advance into the town on foot. Oh, gosh. Leaving his main body at camp. Not seeing anything, the force withdrew to find that even more Union troops had deserted. So they're like, the captain's out of here. We're leaving this shithole, dude.
Like, yeah.
Oh, jeez. Lieutenant Sanchez of the Union was ordered to bring the deserters back. Then Minks attacked. The attack was made to drive the rebels out of town or to set fire to the perimeter houses, which provided cover for the Confederates. I get it. The United States cavalry advanced with wood and matches.
Well, unfortunately for the Union, Confederate force was larger than Minks had anticipated, which we thought was 112. They had also taken the houses Minks intended to burn.
Oh, we'll burn them with it inside.
The advance was stopped by volleys of musket fire, and after 10 minutes, the Union force had been retreated back near camp, at which they started.
Back to square one, boys.
By this time, the Confederates had taken a hill next to the road which led to Fort Craig.
Uh-oh.
Fighting continued for a long while. At almost daybreak, Captain John Minks had found his men reduced to the number of 10.
Jeez.
The 10 and the captain fought off the Confederates at a long range for a few hours while trying to communicate with the main force in camp. Once again, the main body had deserted or withdrew, thinking Minks and his assault party had been massacred.
Oh, my gosh, dude.
They're like, what are we going to do? Well, I'm telling you what, I think Minks is dead. I'm out.
Why is it the Union is always so unprepared like this? I don't understand. Poorly trained.
Well, this is all in New Mexico.
It doesn't matter. It's happening in Virginia.
Yeah, but you want your best guy out in New Mexico.
It's ridiculous, dude. This Union sucks.
You want your best guy out in New Mexico.
Well, you don't want your worst either.
That's right.
Especially if the whole quote unquote war was to
expansion.
Do with expansion and shit. You wanted somebody out there to do something.
Yeah, but you first got to deal with home.
If the Confederates were smart, they would have sent a bunch of troops and guys to conquer all that shit while the war was raging.
Right.
Or the Union, either or. Nobody did shit.
Nobody did.
Minks realized this and decided to fight as long as possible in order to prevent the pursuit and capture of his retreating main body.
Right.
Looking through his spyglass, Minks witnessed about 60 mounted rebels ready to attack.
Ooh.
Well, Minks surrendered between 7 and 8 a.m. in order to prevent further casualties to his remaining 10 men.
Well, when you see 60 guys,
right? I think you're a little outmatched there, but
right.
The retreating main body made its way back to their fort and then followed up their defeat with another patrol farther south at Canada Alamosa. Minks reported that only one of the remaining 10 men was wounded. Okay. Good for them. Confederate reports say that 4 other men were killed and 6 wounded. The 10 men and Captain Minks were taken to Mesilla as prisoners. 12 other troops, deserters or not, were also captured by the rebel cavalry. At least 3 Confederates were wounded. None were reported killed.
Deserters or not?
Or not. They just rounded up anybody.
Even, they thought, I'm a deserter. They'd be like, hey, yeah, but you still fought for the Union, right?
I'm thinking just anybody they found up in the open by the area. They're rounding them up, probably.
Well, if they're definitely a soldier.
Maybe. We all know they weren't wearing all the same uniforms and shit, so.
Very true.
The rebels also captured a good-sized amount of supplies and a few horses and wagons.
Oh, look at that.
Hey, man, that might be the most important thing they did.
You ain't kidding. The next day, September 26th, after the Battle of Alamosa was over, Union Cavalry Patrol under Captain Robert M. Morris skirmished with Confederates involved in the Alamosa engagement and the skirmish near Fort Thorne. That was the battle. This skirmish occurred 30 miles southeast of the town at the north end of Mesilla Valley and 15 miles north of Fort Thorne. Union Colonel Edward Canby, in his report of the engagement, said 10 Confederates were killed and over 30 wounded, in a fight that lasted 1 hour and 42 minutes. The rebel commander Coopwood, in his report to Lieutenant Colonel Baylor, reported 2 of the men were killed and 7 others wounded. Captain Minks confirmed this with this report of the 2 skirmishes written in captivity and allowed to be sent to his superiors.
Oh, good for him.
Right.
Union casualties were reported to be 6 wounded. This was one of the several other small battles in the region. The intelligence Coopwood's Confederate troops obtained from 9 men from the New Mexico Volunteers captured north of Fort Craig was returned to Baylor. They now knew that it only had a 350-man garrison and no artillery. Additionally, their work finding water sources along the mountains west of the Rio Grande would, for the next year, allow the defeated Confederate army to survive their retreat south to Fort Thorne following the Battle of Peralta that trapped them on the east bank, which will come up on the Battle of Peralta.
So nothing's really gaining or...
Nah.
This is just...
Not New Mexico, man.
No, this is just garbage. It's garbage, really.